All right, so let's review what we've done. This slide, we set our name and avatars. And we go here, we set our avatar. We're now going through different modules, and these are locked based on completion. And so when we get to this first module, we go through it. We set some progress meters and different things, collect trophies. When it's complete, we come back here and we'll see that this one's unlocked, and now I can go to module 2. So we're going to look at module 2. Module 2, I can, this is just going to the next slide, so just the intro slide. We're going to come to module 2. Now module 2 is a little bit different here, and if we actually look at the way it was designed in our practice file that you can look at, a couple things going on. I wanted to show you how to build a timer and tie it to things. So we're going to click on, we need to put a reference here. So we click start, and I think I did something wrong here. It's because I don't have my trigger set up right. So we're going to click start, and then I have 5 seconds to click, and I'm counting the clicks in my activities, and then I say, hey, good job. This is how many times you clicked. Put your name in here, collect your trophy, and we're going to continue. Now, one thing, we're not connected to anything. One thing you see, the timer works, and I'm actually going to show you can use a slider for your timer as well. So if you want to have a visual representation of the timer, you could use a slider or other things. In this timer here, you would actually move off the slide. So let's go ahead and move this over here. Let me move this out of the way, and let's work on this. So I'm going to get rid of this this one here. We're going to start from scratch. All right, so what do we want? When we get to the slide, the first thing we do is introduce the activity. Now, I call these gate screens, and a lot of times when you're doing things in a course and you get to a point where the course, you're changing directions, or you have an activity you want them to do, you can kind of stop them with a gate screen. So it's like, give them the information, what are the rules. In this case, they have to see how many times they can press the button in 5 seconds. They hit start, and then it starts the activity. So kind of give them a time, give them a sense to be onboarded to the activity, because you're going through content, and all of a sudden there's an activity, and you got to get them to change their thinking, especially something like this where you only have 5 seconds and they may not pay attention, right? So by having the gate screen, it kind of stops them, and they have to, do something and then read it. All right. And then here at the end of everything, we're going to have a screen that says, hey, great job. And we're going to show your name, and we're going to have this count clicks, how many seconds and all that stuff you had. And then you can collect a trophy. So let's go ahead and build the first thing here. So we're on the main slide. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show this introduction screen. So let's go ahead and put a trigger on here. What do I want to do? I want to show layer and this introduction. And when do I want to show it? When the timeline of the slide starts. All right, so we can see that's here. So if we preview this slide, as soon as the slide starts, this shows this, and then we're going to close this out where there's already a close on there, and now we're into our slide. So let me go ahead and save this because I haven't saved in a while. All right, so we have our introduction. They close it, and then what we want to do is you're going to press this, and we're going to count how many times you can press it within 5 seconds. So we need to create a 5-second timer. Now there's a few ways you can do this. One is you can just use the timeline. So you can, where's it at? Here, the timeline's 5 seconds. So you can just let them press, and when it gets to the end of the timeline, you can show this layer here, and you show them how many times they pressed, and they're just automatically jumped to that. So that's one way to do that. Another way is to kind of create your own timing mechanism, and that's what I want to show here. So what we can do is create a little timer, and this is a trick a lot of people in the community use. So let's just go ahead and add a shape here. And what's nice about this is it's not tied to the timeline. This is 5 seconds and the timeline's complete. But the timeline could be paused or completed, and the the animation's still going to be running. So let's go ahead. We'll call this here our timer. Okay. So we always title things, and we'll just make it look a little different color. So we'll make it look mechanical. So it's a little timer. So we're going to add a motion path animation to that. So when you add an animation, by default, Storyline just assumes you want it to start when the slide starts, which may or may not be true, right? So we're actually going to do it a different way. We're going to say start. Let me, because the way I think the demo's done is it starts automatically, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to make you start it. But we're going to have a motion path on here. So let's go ahead and add animation. We're going to add a motion path. Doesn't matter which one you want to add. Doesn't matter how long. Now this motion path here, when we look at it, by default, it's set to run for 1 second or 2 seconds. We're going to make it run for 1 second. So just type in 1. It's always good to title this stuff. So just call this, it could be motion path timer, right? So you know what it's titled at. And then the other thing is we can see that the motion path timer, so the timer is set to move when the timeline of the slide starts. Well, we don't necessarily want to do that. So we're going to come to introduction. We hit start. We may not want the timer going. Now, the way we built it initially was it's going automatically, but I'm going to show you how to just have the user trigger it. So we don't want it to move automatically, so we need to change this trigger. So we want to move the timer on this timeline, motion path timer, when, we'll say when user clicks the timer, right? So when they click this, that's going to start it. So let's go ahead and preview this. So it should open the gate screen. Start closes it, and we click this, and that triggers the motion path. Everything's working perfectly. Let's go ahead and save, because it's always good to save. And now what we want to do is this is going to run for 1 second. And what we want to do is when this is done, we want it to run again. So what do we want to do? We can actually just copy this trigger. We want to move this and paste it. So we want to move, if we open this up, we want to move timer, motion path timer, when animation completes. Which animation? The timer's animation on the motion path timer. So basically it's going to start initially when we hit the start button. It's going to go. As soon as it completes, it's going to trigger this, which says run it, and it's going to complete, and it's going to run it again. So if we preview this, we should see that it keeps going. Hit start. All right, I'm ready. Start. And 1. So this is basically 1 second, right? So what's 1 second? It's a clock. So I just need to have a way to display that. So what we're going to do is create a variable. Let's create a variable. That's always what we want to do. And let's add a variable. So let's just call this timer variable, and we'll make it a number variable. And we'll start at, doesn't really matter what we started at. All right, and we're going to hit OK. And so what we want to do now is when this animation completes, we want to set that timer. We're going to add 1 to it. And so that'll give us a 1 second countdown. So if we add a trigger here, what do we want to do? We want to adjust the variable. Which variable? The timer that we just created. And we want to add 1 when animation completes. So which animation? The timer animation on the timer motion path. So what's going to happen is this is going to go, last a second, it's going to adjust the variable and add 1 to it. It's going to start over, it's going to add 2 to it, it's going to add 3. And what does that look like? A clock. So now what we need to do is just put a reference to that variable so we can see it moving. So let's go ahead and insert the text box here, and we'll insert a reference, and we'll choose timer, hit OK, And I'll make this a little larger so you can see it. Okay. So if we preview this, what we should see is the clock that just keeps running. Now we've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 second clock. And it's just going to keep going, which is better than the timeline because the timeline eventually ends, but this just keeps going. So I can use this information. So I can count down, I can count up. It really doesn't matter. So what I want to do is we're going to count clicks. How many times can you click in 5 seconds? So let's go ahead and add a variable where we can count the clicks. So we're going to add a variable. We'll just call it count clicks. And we're going to make that a number variable as well. And we'll have it set at 0. Hit OK. And we can just put a reference here. We're going to copy this here, and let's just do the same thing. Insert reference count clicks. So now we can see how many clicks you have. All right. So we've got a variable. Now every time we press this button, we need to count clicks. So let's go ahead and add a trigger on here. What do I want to do? I want to adjust the variable, count clicks. I want to add 1 every time the user clicks this button. So if we preview this, start, I can click forever until I retire. Hit start here. I'm counting in 1 second increments, and I can keep clicking. So I don't want you to click forever. I want you to click until 5. So what I'm going to do is just say I'm going to disable this button at 5, or maybe I'll disable it at 6, and then you can't click anymore. And then I'll jump to this other layer that says, hey, this is what you did so far. So let's go ahead and do that. So we don't want you to be able to click this. So we can jump right out, or we can stop it and say, okay, and then move on. We're just going to jump right out. So what we're going to do is when the state, well, let's say when the variable timer equals 5, so that's 5 seconds, we're going to jump to the great job thing, and we're displaying your count clicks and your name here, right? So let's go ahead and set a trigger on here. What do I want to do? I want to show layer. Which layer? Great job. When variable changes, which variable? The timer variable. And we're going to go ahead and say if timer variable is equal to, and I'll say 6, so it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you get that extra second. So we'll just say 6 rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it jumps. Okay, so let's preview this. What should happen is this should count our clicks. I got 5 seconds to click as many times as I can. When the 5 seconds are up, it should come here and it should display how many clicks I've gotten, and we'll be done. So let's go ahead and preview this slide and let's see what happens. I'm going to start, and now I have 5 seconds. Oh, well, that's a cheat. So let me replay this here. We're going to start. The variable's already set. So I'm going to click here, and at 5, boom, I'm done. It said I clicked it 29 times, collect my trophy, and I'm going to continue. So let's finish the trophy, and then we'll look at the slider element to that. So this is where I probably might say, well, I don't want to do this. I'm going to take this off, and I'm just going to say when this starts, the timer starts, right? So move this when the timer starts. So it just depends on how you want to do that. And let's see here, we want to collect our trophy. So we're just going to do this here. We already have that trophy variable, right? So we have a trophy variable here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a trigger on here, adjust variable. which one? Trophy, and we're going to let you add one to that. So you accomplish your task, you're super smart, good clicker, and that's good to go. And then we can also do the disabled state. So let's change the state of that trophy, wherever it's at, trophy here, to disabled when user clicks on it. All right, I don't like the start timer, so I'm going to take this off. So we're not going to move timer when user clicks, so we're going to remove that. And let's go ahead and let's just do this. We're going to click on this, so let's see if we can set that. So what do we want to do? We want to move what? We want to move timer on motion path timer when the user clicks this button. And we gave them an extra second, so they can't complain, right? So you got 5 seconds, you're going to click, and then the timer's going to start working. I think that works a lot smoother. All right, so let's preview this, and then we'll look at the timer real quick. Hit start, and now it's going. I've got 5 seconds here. Let's see how many I can get. I think my record was 29. 28. And I can't click anymore. I can collect my trophy, and then I can continue, and that would go then to the next slide. All right, the one last thing I want to show, we built a progress meter the other way where we were counting down. So we did that on another slide. Here's another way to do a progress meter, and that's just use a slider or a dial. So you could, in real life, you would move this off because you don't want the timer visible, right? And then you could probably set the initial state here at 5, or you can, we'll say this goes to 5. So the value of this is 0 to 5, and then we could subtract 1. So this is slider 1 here. What we can do is this only goes to 5, right? So let's do this and let's make it easier. Let's set the initial state to 0 because that's going to be the same. And so 0 to 5, right? So 0 to 5, we have 5 seconds. So instead of setting a trigger up for this, we're just going to connect this slider to our timer variable and watch what happens. When the timer goes, it's going to change the value, which is going to move this. Oops. Oh, it's moving. I wasn't paying attention. All right, so let's redo that here. So I hit start. You can see it's moving, right? And I'm going to click, and then it stops. So that's a nice thing to do. You can use this. You can customize these to look any way you want to, right? So you can make a nice looking countdown clock. You could do the same thing with a dial. So we'll just take a dial here, and we'll make it. And we'll do the dial. We're going to do the same thing. A dial, we will have it go 0 to 5. And we'll say its initial value is at 0, and we'll have it go the other direction, right? You just have to reverse it based on how you're working the numbers. All right, so what we're going to do here is this should move and this should move. So let's go ahead and preview the slide. And you can see that, oh, you know what I forgot to do? Dial is going to have a dial variable, but we're going to hook that up to timer, and then this should move as well. So using the dials or timers just makes it a lot easier when you want to do things like progress, so you can see how that works. So you can create a clock or something like that, but it's basically doing the work for you. So that's an easier way to do that. So you've got that one variable. You can hook these things up to the variable. You notice we moved the timer off screen, so you can't quite see it, or you can't see it at all. And when you're doing your editing and working, you can always move it onto the screen. Hopefully that helps you. When we get to the other slides, we'll start to assemble some of those module completes. Oh, the other thing, this is one last thing. We need to set this module complete. And when do we want to set this module complete? Well, we'll probably take it off of here. So I'm going to delete this. And we want to set it up when you get to great job. We'll just say when you click on this button, you're done, right? So we're going to make the module complete when you click on the button. So let's go ahead and add a trigger. What do I want to do? I want to adjust variable. Which variable? Module to complete, and I want to make that true when the user clicks the button. And so now it's a little bit more involved than it was before. So you actually have to do something to mark it complete. Before it was just visiting the slide. Now you actually have to do the activity you had planned in that module. So hopefully that helps. It's a little bit more involved than those previous slides, but a lot of good content, a lot of nuance to working with timers and sliders.